Skillful movement and reflex formation in adults. An examination of Newell's constraints via the martial art Kali by John. Why use a martial art? Most adults who begin training in a martial art have never adapted their fundamental motor skills to the type of movements within a martial art system. While most people who play baseball have run, or most people who play football have caught a ball, and vice versa, very few people have ever translated those gross motor movements for those skills into, say, punching or kicking a moving target. So we use a martial art because it forces people to redevelop their fundamental motor skills from the very beginning with a novel series of constraints. In addition, unlike in other sports where there is an excitement level involved, the presence of the element of fear alters the dynamic of skill acquisition because the surplus flow of adrenaline into the body tissues damages the way that the body and brain pick up novel reflex formation. The element of fear causes people to overcompensate in movement, so it has to be contended with in skill acquisition, especially since the goal task constraint is to avoid injury from another opponent. Why do we study this skill formation in Kali? As you can see from the picture, Kali derives itself around the use of weapons, and these are inherently dangerous and threatening to most people. Advantages of a weapon-based system is that we immediately begin to deal with this increased sympathetic nervous activity. We incorporate the weapon as a stimulus, and it decreases the future severity of arousal upon stimulus presentation. In addition, Kali is based on gross motor movements, which decreases time to task effect for novitiates. Essentially what this means is that because it's based on gross motor skills and not on fine motor skills, it doesn't take as long to learn effective motor skills within the task constraints that are necessary for self-defense. Novices learn to defend and escape from situations more rapidly than systems requiring the dedicated perfection of skillful movements over many years. In addition, ideomotor action doesn't come into play because ideomotor action is ineffective when avoiding a weapon. One doesn't want to go where the opponent wants you to go. Movement patterns and geometry are analogous whether weaponed or not, decreasing skill acquisition time. The way I move to avoid a knife is the same if I have one, whether I have a knife, a stick, no knife, no stick, just my empty hands, or a gun. I still have to learn the same movements and the same geometries to get out of the way. There, I don't have to learn a second system. There isn't any additional information that's required of me. How does skillful adaptation to affect task completion really occur? By provoking awareness of timing. The primary constraint, the task constraint in anticipating an opponent, is anticipating an awareness of timing. Skillful motor coordination in combat thus concerns itself with understanding timing and disrupting it in the opponent. In Kali, this principle is applied immediately via partner training to teach the student to balance feed-forward and feedback sensory data. This is taken in the form of what are called flow drills, knife tapping practice, which in and of themselves are effectively useless in combat, but they're extremely effective in teaching a person to understand variations in timing, which is where real combat occurs in a few seconds. Whether or not I can understand how your pattern of behavior can be interrupted and dealt with so that I can regain the initiative in the surprise encounter is what's going to determine how well I survive that encounter. A review of the constraints in combat and how primary organism constraints. The first one is sympathetic disruption of cognitive focus and skillful motor control brought about by presentation of a noxious stimulus and uncomfortable proximity. When I'm suddenly confronted with a person approaching me with a knife, the primary event that will occur is an extreme response by the sympathetic nervous system for the flight or fight response. This is very, very disruptive to making an informed decision about how I'm going to survive the encounter, particularly when I have maybe only a second or two to make this decision. The solution is that we repeatedly present the noxious stimuli in a format that encourages hand-eye coordination to deal with it, while promoting confidence and threat avoidance. By continually forcing me to deal with this kind of a situation, I learn how to deal with it, and how, more importantly, to suppress that normal arousal response from my body. Because the stimuli presentation is increasing over time, the amount of response is going to be decreasing over time. I'm not going to be as scared in dealing with the stimuli. Another organism constraint is size difference. Males and females have differing levels of muscular strength and size, conferring an advantage on males in situations of equal physical skill. In Kali, this really doesn't matter. At close range, it's more about your ability to get out of the way, your technique, and your speed, which in women typically will have the advantage. One, because they're not as big as men, and they have to grapple with that, and they have to anticipate that and deal with that. So they don't try to they don't try to out-wrestle men, they don't try to grapple with them, they try to maneuver around them. And this is exactly what we want them to do, particularly if the male has a weapon. The second reason is that women are more feed-forward anticipatory in how they deal with men, and this is exactly what you need in a weapon-based system. So it lends itself very well to equalizing the difference in force production between men and women. Where a man will typically try to assert his strength over a woman, he'll find that this is quickly nullified by a woman's speed and her ability to reach his sensory organs and to disrupt his ability to perceive the environment. In a fight, when you are able to apprehend that you're in a fight, there's an overload of variables that are encountered in a stressful situation. Primarily, your hand-eye coordination is lost. You're quickly trying to acquire a moving target that is attacking you and causing you physical pain, maybe forcing you to defend yourself. So your fine motor skill coordination goes out the window as you try to protect your sensory organs. At the very beginning, we adjust the pace of training to deal with this. You start very slowly, and you start by attacking sensory structures and by anticipating and feeling how uncomfortable it is at close range situations. We then accelerate the pace of drills as you grow more comfortable until we then suddenly present you with a novel position or situation within the drill. At that point, we begin a new drill based on the old drill, and we continue advancing knowledge progression in this fashion. Very quickly, people realize that just the few basic skills they had become so much more accelerated that they're able to avoid most real-world situations. Advanced skills, no matter how skillful, are nonetheless primarily based on gross motor skills. So even in an overload situation for an advanced practitioner who's facing multiple opponents, he finds he has greater facility with his movements in terms of anticipating escape, or at least in terms of dealing with the opponents directly, than with the average person in the situations. Finally, students are taught to guard their sensory organs while attacking opponents, and leverage their reaction time in the face of surprise. Environmental constraint. Physical encounters can happen in any area and under numerous conditions not encountered in a training facility. We practice dynamic alteration between various ranges and vertical levels. This lends itself well to adaptation under adverse conditions, such as stairs, dark hallways, and multi-angular environments with multiple egress and egress points. It's not always advisable or practical to carry a weapon. That's fine. We initially teach you how to deal with a weapon when you do not have one. Whether you have a weapon or do not have a weapon, the gross motor skills that are used in combat situations developed in Kali are the same. Most systems of self-defense teach unrealistic or unworkable methods of weapon defense. Unfortunately, most systems, after spending a lot of time practicing sport combat, then try to prepare someone for real combat. And the reality is real combat never occurs in this fashion. Usually an intelligent opponent will take you by surprise, and usually they will attack you with a weapon. We anticipate this, it begins how we practice, and at no time do we invite any kind of speculative reasoning into the situation. This has to be backed up by real practical demonstration. So if you want to say it works, you have to prove that it works, and on the Kali mat, this takes the form of strict empiricism, and the system is designed this way.